Shalom Aleichem, Erev Tov, good evening. We are together, continuing Rabbi Chaim David Halevy's essay on Dat U'Medinah, Church and State in a Modern State of Israel. Part of what we are trying to analyze together is to find textual basis, evidence, that suggests that a civil government, non-Torah leadership, is able to add, change, adjust, I'll use the word fill in the blanks or the voids left by the Torah, in order to make a more perfect or more just or more necessary legal system work for the Jewish people. And we've mentioned this before in the past, but due to some of the shiurim that may have been deleted, last week we spent a significant amount of time on the laws of murder and showing how the Batei Din, that of the court, and later in the Sanhedrin, the Bedin Gadol, are able to add in penalties that otherwise the Torah wouldn't warrant in order to make sure that you wouldn't have a Jewish society that was rampant with murder. And whereas that made sense in the realm of life and death and murder in people's life, some might question whether it only applies there. And so today's shiur, I want to take us somewhere else. And that's the laws of mamonot, the laws of finances. And to show you that also in terms of basic systems of taxation and thievery and robbery and all of those areas of halakha, that this idea exists there as well. In order to do that, if last time we studied together the second chapter of the laws of murder of the Rambam, today I wish to study with you the fifth chapter of the laws of theft of the Rambam. And so if you open up a Mishneh Torah, so if you either have a book or you go to sefaria.org and you click halakha, Mishneh Torah, you should find the laws of Gizela v'Aveda, robbery and lost objects. I don't know how they would translate that. If someone finds it, you're welcome to post it in the chat box. And for full disclosure, I was stuck in a car for the last 4 hours on the way back from Mexico. So I was sitting in traffic without any books, trying to prepare my shiur from whatever resources I have on my iPhone. So if the page numbers are not clear for me, it's because I'm trying to adapt what I saw on a tiny little screen to what I'm seeing here in the books in front of me. In the fifth chapter of the laws of Gizela v'Aveda, the Rambam is going to introduce to us a few concepts that are important for us to understand. And trust me that Mexico will have a very big part in this shiur. So min shemaya was from heaven that I was there today.
Just quick interruption. Where in the Rambam are we jumping to?
We're in the laws of Gizela v'Aveda. So, here's what Rabbeinu Rambam says. Chapter 5, Halakha 1. Asur liknot davar hagazul min hagazlan. It is forbidden to purchase something that is stolen from the person who stole it. So, there are some places in the world where you can go to certain areas of town and they'll sell you things that fell off a truck. Colloquially, at least, they fell off a truck. If you know that that's the case, it's forbidden for you to buy those things. It doesn't matter that they're the criminal, you're just the person coming to purchase it. You are forbidden from involving yourself in that type of behavior, and therefore it is forbidden to purchase stolen goods from a thief, a robber. And I'm going to use the word thief and robber interchangeably. Halachically, there is a difference between a ganav and a gazlan, but not for this moment. Chapter 5. V'asur lesa'ado al shinuyo k'dei sheiknehu. It's forbidden for you to help him change the object, and this has to do with the second chapter. I don't want to get stuck on this detail, but if you're interested, look into the second chapter of the laws of Gizela, and you'll see over there that in certain situations, a robber can be exempt from returning the stolen goods if some kind of change happens to it. Because anybody who does anything similar in assisting robbers, he is strengthening the hands of people who are violators of averot. And he violates the prohibition found in the book of Vayikra that you should not put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. So if I may, there are two different things that happen when a person helps a robber or a thief unload their merchandise. The first, you're assisting a person who is engaged in a forbidden business, and the fact that you are helping such a person means that you are part of their avera, and you're not allowed to help a person commit averot. The second, there's a prohibition in the Torah. The Torah says you shall not put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. I may have shared the story with you once, at least here in the Kehillat. When I first got my driver's license, I don't know, 16 years old, 17 years old, my father used to have a Volkswagen Vanagon. It's one of those hippie vans, or perhaps what you saw in Scooby-Doo, something similar. And that's what I would drive around San Diego with. And in those days, the car didn't have a CD player. You couldn't connect your MP3 player to there. The only thing you could listen to was the radio, and it happened to be the radio in this car. Half the things didn't work in it. And so the one channel that always worked was this Christian news radio. You could hear all the hottest pastors and priests speaking about the greatest and most exciting things in the world. And so randomly, you get bored. That's in the car. I remember driving on the 805 freeway in San Diego, and all of a sudden, Pastor Mike gets on the air, and he's talking about this ancient practice of the Hebrews, the Israelites in the desert, that when Moses met them, they had this crazy obsession with finding blind people and throwing rocks in front of them, watching them fall, and they would all get around and laugh at the person who was falling. And so the Lord Almighty had to warn the ancient Israelites that behavior was entirely unacceptable, and they were not allowed to take rocks and place them in front of the blind people, because that's not a nice thing to do. Now, let's for a moment just say that there definitely is room in rabbinic tradition to discuss whether or not the literal verse here is connected to an avera, meaning we know, according to our HaShamayim, that the prohibition of do not place a stumbling block in front of a blind person actually means, what does it mean?
Not assist them in their avera.
Okay, that's close.
Or cause someone to stumble through either.
Somebody who's otherwise blind, meaning they're blind in the area of life they came to get advice from you. Don't give them bad advice. Don't cause them to do something wrong. That's considered lifnei iver lo titen michshol. Or, like Binyamin, you just said, helping someone do an avera actively, again, falls into that category of lifnei iver lo titen michshol. So all of this is understood by our Chachamim not to literally mean tripping blind people, but the idea is we don't assist people in doing things that are wrong or cause them to do things that are wrong. If you look in the laws of Geneva, the section before, let's jump back there if we can. So it's the section before this section, also in chapter 5. The Rambam says almost identical words. So section 5, chapter 5 of Hilchot Geneva. Asur liknot min haganav, hachefet sheganav. It is forbidden to take from the ganav something that he stole. Ve'avon gadol hun, it's a great sin. Sheharei mechazek yedei overei avera, because you are helping people who do averot. V'gorem lo lignov genevot acherot. This is something he didn't say before. And you are giving him incentive. You are causing this person to crime pays. You're causing this person to recognize that it's worthwhile for me to steal, because I steal. Nobody bans my products, and therefore, as long as I have a market to sell to when I steal things, I'm going to continue stealing. And so the people who purchase stolen goods are actually enabling or causing promoting those people who steal to continue doing it. Because if there's no market for something, if I have no client, I will never steal. And that's what it says. In Mishle, it says that a person so I don't want to. The pasuk continues over there. That you can look it up. Mishle 29. Right now, you find that a person who's involved, even in a passive way of buying stolen goods, he's not stealing. Essentially, they are the reason why people steal. And so, Rabbeinu Rambam says this thing is forbidden. In Halakha Bet, so go back to our original section, chapter 5, Halakha Bet. Asur lehanot b'devar hagazul. It is forbidden to get any kind of benefit from that which is stolen. V'afilu la'achar yeush, and even after a person has given up hope. You know, there's a difference in status between before the owners have hope of regaining this object and to when they already have given up hope. And you have to be certain that that which you are deriving benefit from is something that you have stolen or was stolen. Ketad, how so? Yada bevadai shebehema zo gezula. If you know certainly that this animal was a stolen animal, it's forbidden to use it to plow your field or to ride on it. If you know the car is stolen, then you're not allowed to drive it. It doesn't matter that you're not the person who stole it. It's forbidden to get any kind of benefit from it. Gazal bait or sadeh. By the way, 2 notes. Crime pays. I'm sure you know here in California there's an incentive for stealing less than $950. I think that's the number. And that is that as long as a person steals less than a certain amount, so the police don't actually get involved in that crime. And I'm sure that though that was intended to keep smaller criminals out of the bigger system of crime and everything else, but at the end of the day, what it has caused is that people can run into a store, fill up a shopping cart of stuff, and as long as it's less than $950, they just walk out the front door. Most stores have a policy not to pursue the criminal. And the police, even if they're sitting right outside, probably won't get involved because this is not officially considered a crime that they need to get involved in. In fact, I was with my wife once at Melrose Avenue. I think it's an avenue. Melrose in Los Angeles. There's a kosher restaurant there we went to, and we're walking back, and there was a sunglasses store. And it wasn't like fancy sunglasses. It was pretty cheap sunglasses there. And I saw there's a big guard standing in front of the door. And I inquired as to why they have a guard for such inexpensive products. It would be like putting a guard in front of the 99-cent store. It doesn't really make sense. A jewelry store I get, but the 99-cent store I don't get. And they explained to me that that's the problem, is they don't sell expensive sunglasses. If they sold expensive sunglasses, then it would be a crime to steal from them. But because they don't sell expensive sunglasses, then it's not a crime to steal from them, and they have to provide their own security to make sure that people don't steal from them. That kind of thing means that crime pays. And in halakha, we want to make sure that we dry out those criminals, that they should feel that there is no market. If we know that something fell off the truck, we will not buy it from you. It doesn't matter how good the price is. The second, here you're talking about stolen goods. You know what happened to me? My car wasn't stolen. I just remembered it now because when I drove over the border, I saw the border patrol cars. I once stole a border patrol car, but I didn't know that. It's a true story. It must have been a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. It was February, because I went to renew the registration. I have a big 15-passenger van, and I went to renew the registration for my van, and I don't remember my license plate number by heart, and I went to the driveway to go look at my license plate, and I look at my license plate, I don't recognize those numbers. And so but what do I know? I double-check my phone to make sure if it matches my phone, and it's not the right license plate. And when I look at the plate, it says California exempt, meaning you don't have to pay registration. And I said, when did I get a California exempt car? And then I realized, wait a second, nobody stole my car. They stole my plates. I have someone else's license plate. Then I didn't know what to do. I mean, what do you do when someone steals your license plates? Especially now that I have to renew the registration. And so I called in the non-emergency police hotline, and somewhere around 2 o'clock in the morning, these police officers show up. And they look up the plates and they say, sir, you've stolen a Border Patrol van. There's a 15-passenger van missing from Border Patrol. It was stolen about 3 weeks ago. And I said, I promise you that I have not stolen a Border Patrol van. Just go check the VIN number. They checked the VIN number, and the VIN number matches my car. And that's when it clicked to them. There was a whole crime ring in San Diego that what they do is they steal cars. For example, they steal a 15-passenger white Border Patrol van, and they want to get away with it. So the thing they do is they look for another van that looks similar. They steal those plates. They put the clean plates on the hot car, and they put the hot plates on the clean car. And the police officer said, if you would have been driving down the freeway and your license plate would have been scanned by one of our police scanners, you would have been pulled over by some federal police officer. They'd pull guns on you. First, they would put you in handcuffs, and only then they would check your VIN number. So you're actually very lucky that you called us and we didn't find you. And it turned out that for a number of weeks, I was driving a car that technically was a stolen federal car. And that's the kind of thing that happens in the world. There are thieves in the world. And if you know, chas v'shalom, that a car is stolen, by the way, listen to the avil of it all. I had to go pay for new license plates and a new registration and a new everything because they stole my plates. Gazal bayit o sadeh. If someone steals a home or a field, can it happen that somebody could steal a home? How do you steal someone's house? Squatter. I think stealing the title is a much more sophisticated way of stealing someone's house. And that can happen. For sure it can happen. But I think squatters is probably the best way to think about it. There's a law, again, that was intended to try to help save tenants from evil landlords. And what that has done in turn is made it almost impossible in certain places to evict tenants even if they don't pay you your rent. And that especially happened in this country during the years of COVID. So during COVID, I had some people come over to me and complain, why are you paying rent? You don't make enough money to pay rent. Just wait till afterwards. He'll tough it out. I said, Chevron, I have a nice landlord. He's a good person. He's let me live in his house for so many years. He has a mortgage to pay every month. The man has expenses that he pays in the house. I have money, Baruch Hashem. I'm able to afford it. How can I possibly, and just because a law would allow me to, how can I possibly hold back from paying him what he deserves? Then what's he going to do? How many people lost properties because they couldn't pay their bills because their tenants didn't have to pay them? Squatters are people who move at their house and listen, prove it. The police won't evict me because I claim it's my house. You claim it's your house. Let's go to court. It could take years and years and years. I had a man who used to be here in the shiurim on Mondays and Tuesday nights. He passed away, alav shalom, since then. He once had to pay tenants here in San Diego $40,000 in cash to leave his house. They stayed there for years. He couldn't get them out of the house. They were destroying his house. He had to pay a mortgage every month. And the only way that it made sense was instead of all the lawyers and everything he paid, he just paid them cash to leave. A person who lives like that, it doesn't matter which kind of law allows you, that person is stealing a house. They're stealing a field. Someone who does that, אסור לעבור בתוכה או להיכנס לה בחמה מפני החמה או בגשמים מפני הגשמים. You cannot go into that house because of the sun or the rain. ואם דר בתוכה, and if he lives inside of it, חייב להעלות שכר לבעלים כדין הדר בחצר חברו שלא מדעתו. You'd have to then ultimately pay back this person for rent, for living there. גזל דקלים, if someone steals palm trees. ועשה מהן גשר, and they made a bridge out of it. אסור לעבור עליו. It's forbidden for a person to walk on that bridge because that bridge was stolen. וכן כל כיוצא בזה, and anything that is similar to this is forbidden for us. So not only can we not steal, but we cannot be aiding or abetting criminal activity in any way possible. And I have to tell you the truth. When I look at Am Yisrael and I see the areas of halakha that the Jewish people are very particular about, things that are not so important, some things that are not even real. And I look at the laws of Gezela, Geneva, Aveda, and I say, where are the chumrot here? Where are the people that are so particular not to even touch something that was stolen from somebody else? How many people are careful to be honest when they pay their taxes? That's not a form of stealing? Doesn't matter how many people do it. Doesn't matter which legal loopholes or illegal loopholes you utilize. How many government programs are people going to steal from before someone says, I'm going to treat the person who steals from my government programs the same way that I treat a person who sells nevelot to torefot? Why should they be treated any different? I don't know if you remember a few years ago in New York, there was a huge FBI raid of a certain Hasidic group to Shivot because they had stolen millions and millions of dollars of technology grants from the state of New York, and they had for laptops and for underprivileged children and those kind of things. They ended up selling those computers to other people, and private parties got involved and convinced the schools to ask for the funding, and they split it half and half with the school and all kinds of crazy things. And then I get in my Jewish WhatsApp group, the anti-Semites of the FBI have raided so-and-so yeshiva. As the anti-Semites of the FBI, maybe they're just crooks that are Jewish people, and they don't care about the basic laws of stealing that we have in halakha. And forgive me if what I'm saying is hurtful. There are things that people do that are not okay, and just because everyone does them, I don't want to make anybody upset. There are entire websites that are dedicated, and unfortunately some of them have a very big Jewish following, to finding out when certain companies make mistakes in pricing or things like that, and get a whole world to jump on those prices. Come on, nobody afraid of violating from the 10 Commandments? Am Yisrael has to worry about those mitzvot much more than what kind of milk you put inside of your coffee. Halakha Dalet Hey Vav, I'm going to skip. They're important because they show that the Geonim, even after the times of the Talmud, were able to legislate things that otherwise the rabbis of the Talmud did not. And if you wanted to look into the halachic mechanism of that, I would suggest looking in depth at the commentaries in Halakha Vav, number 6 over here. But I don't want to get stuck on it. Let's look in Halakha Chet. Halakha Chet. Okay. Let's read Halakha Chet. Asur lehanot min hagazlan. It is forbidden to get benefit from the gazlan. Vim haya mu'at shelo, af al pi shero mamono gazul, mutar lehanot mimenu. Ad shivada bevadai shedavar ze gazul biyado. Okay, there's a certain amount of property or money that a person must steal before I'm able to decide whether I can get benefit from the robber or not. That's assuming that a person, some of his money is stolen, and some of his money is not stolen. But what happens about a person who we know that their whole livelihood is stealing? Bnei Adam, there are people, shechezkatan gazlanin, that it's known that it's a chazaka on them. Is there a good English word for chazaka? The working assumption we have is that they are thieves. Vecheskat kol mamuna min hagazel, and it's assumed that all of the money they have is stolen. Mipnei shemelachtan gazlanut, because their profession is thievery. Kigon hamochsin v'halistin. The mochsin are the tax collectors. The tax collectors. V'halistim, who are listim? They're the highway robbers. Asur le'anot mehen. It's forbidden to get any benefit from them. Shecheskat machal zeh shu gazul, because any food they have to offer you, you can assume is stolen. Ve'en metzarfin dinarin min hateva shlehen shakol b'cheskat gezela. And you can't even use the money in their money box. Meaning you can't exchange, I have $20, I want 2 10s, or 1 10 and 2 5s. You can't touch their money. Even though you're giving money, you're exchanging money, you didn't give it, you're not allowed to be involved with them because their entire profession is stealing. The next halakha, skip it, number 10, let's look at number 11. Bameh devarim amurim, shamoches kilistim. In which situation do I assume that a tax collector is stealing? I know with all the jokes aside, I was once in a gas station that said, please don't shoplift. The IRS doesn't need any competition stealing from us. I know that there is a certain attitude that I don't want to pay taxes, why do I have to pay taxes, that people are stealing my taxes. Let's put aside for a moment that you live in countries that have normal governments for the most part, that have laws, that have a system of changing those laws or amending those laws or fixing those laws. In yesteryear, who was a tax collector? How did tax collectors work?
They would get commissions from the government to do their job.
Okay, so let's say the opposite way. They would pay the government for the honor or the merit of being a tax collector. The government needed people to collect taxes, and they were more than willing to be the volunteers. And let's say the government needed $1,000 from people, they would make sure that they collected $1,500 from people, and they would pocket the $500 for themselves, and they would pay the $1,000 forward. And like that, these people were tax collectors, but they weren't the IRS who had laws that they followed, that they collect a certain amount of your income based on how much you make and how much you spend and how much your expenses are and how many children you have. It all had to do with how much money he could squeeze out of you. Now, I'm sure that there are people who feel that way about the IRS also. You know the story. Rabbanit is on the call? The Rabbanit is on the call, but she's probably taking care of things over there. Sometimes the Rabbanit is about the guy who's choking on a quarter, Rabbanit.
What? I'm sorry.
The guy who's choking on a quarter. Sometimes the Rabbanit runs the auctions in the Beit Knesset. She's the only brave person in the room. And this was one of her introductions many years ago on High Holidays. Rabbanit, you'll share a story with us?
I would like you to say it so everyone else could hear it, because over here we're a little bit busy.
So I'm going to tell you a story before I tell you the Rabbanit story. Every year it comes High Holidays, we run auctions in the Beit Knesset. What kind of auctions? I wish you could see how small this room is. It's not a big room. Those of you who've been here, it's not a huge place. We have a few people that come here, Chagim. But what we do in auction is for the very simple reason that, Baruch Hashem, we all want to help the Kehillat, and we all put our hands together to help. And it happens to be also that there are guests that come for Chagim. We don't want to start fighting why you give this person an honor, that person an honor. So we let everyone bid on these auctions, and you'll see that a beautiful thing about our Kehillat is that you would say it's only the people who have money are the ones who win the bids. You'll notice that in the Kehillat, there are always people outbidding each other. And whoever wins, once they got their first kibud, if it was the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and now they won 3, 4, 5, 6 more auctions on Yom Kippurim, Sukkot, Simchat Torah, they always hand out to their friends. Everybody shares with everybody. It's something very special. It's a very special midot that come out in people here. And so it's something we do because we close our doors and we're a small kehillah anyway, so nobody gets the wrong feeling walking to the Beit Knesset when there's an auction. Happens to be that whoever was running our auctions back in the day didn't show up on the Chagim, and we needed someone to step into their place. I don't touch money in the kehillah, so it's not something I would do. We had a few other people that attempted to run auctions. Everybody had their own talents, and auctioning was not one of them. And it was a really tight place. I think it was Rosh Hashanah, right before COVID. And at a certain point, I turned to the Rabbanit and said, Devara, please, if you could just get up and run the auction. So here's exactly what the Rabbanit did. She got up and walked to the men's section. I needed to understand that the men's section is right here, and the women's section is right here. Okay, that's like you must understand how the room looks. And those of you who've been here, I see you smiling. She walked all the way from the ladies section and came here to the men's section, and she ran the auction. After Tefillah, there was a couple that was visiting here from Ohio. They were an Israeli couple from Ohio. And they were in tears. They were so emotional. And Rabbi, we need to talk to you. We just want to share with the both of you. We can't believe we've come to such a special community where the Rabbanit is allowed to stand up in front of the community, and she says jokes and she tells stories and she auctions things up. It's so special to see people that are so forward thinking, and that we got this, they were crying. They were so emotional. And the Rabbanit took the lead in that conversation. But at a certain point, I had to explain to people that in a normal community, these kind of conversations aren't conversations. In a normal community. What do I mean by a normal community? In a normal community, so listen, we sit separately. I'm not going to pretend to you that we don't. That's how we pray. That's how we understand how Halakha wants us to pray. But the rest of everything that we do here, we are all friends with each other. We are all family with each other. We are all part of the same community. We all know what each other looks like. We all know who is married to who. We all know whose kids are whose. And in a normal society, normal people can interact normally without over-sexualizing or making things perverse or crazy. And the fact that the Rabbanit, who is like the mother of the community, would stand up in front of the community and talk to them was not anything that anybody even batted an eyelid about unless they came from outside of the community, where clearly it's unheard of, or it's unimaginable that a woman would stand up in front of the community. If there is a community where a woman would stand up in front of the community, it must be out of some agenda to put a woman in front of the community. And here it's just something that would happen so naturally and so normally that it was a little bit surprising, but that was how the Rabbanit became our temporary auctioneer. In that auction, it was already a few days into the Chagim, and people were, I guess, they donated a lot. And the Rabbanit mentioned that there was once a kid who was walking around, not a kid, it was a college student, was walking around Costco, and he had a quarter, and he would throw it in the air and catch it between his teeth. And he'd stop people, hey, you want to see a trick? He would throw it in the air, catch it between his teeth. He would do, he'd walk around Costco, throw it in the air, catch it between his teeth. And one time he stopped someone and said, hey, you want to see a trick? And he throws it in the air, and instead of catching his teeth, it got stuck in his throat. And he starts choking, and he's coughing, and he's falling on the floor, and people running over, they're doing the Heimlich maneuver, they cannot get this coin out, he's crying, he thinks he's gonna die. All of a sudden, some guy says, move over, I got it. And he comes over, and he pushes him, and boom, the quarter pops out. And they catch the quarter, and they say, sir, what are you? Are you some magical healer? What do you do? What kind of medicine do you practice? He says, me? Nothing. I just work for the IRS. Some people are able to squeeze a quarter out of anybody, cheva. And this muhsin were known that they would squeeze people for every last piruta that they had, every last coin that they had. And so in halakha, we treated them as thieves. Bizman sham moches goy. So here it was that we assumed, and this doesn't necessarily have to be a fair assumption, but this is something that our chachamim assumed based on their experiences, that the people who were non-Jewish tax collectors were thieves in the way that they taxed people. O moches ha'omed me'elav. Or it's a tax collector who has appointed himself to collect taxes. Have you ever seen such a thing before? Somebody who collects taxes, but they're not actually a tax collector? An example, there's a lady, a famous lady, she drives through Africa on her motorcycle from country to country to country. And she's a famous TikToker. And she shows that every time she comes to some random village, some guy will stop in the road and claim he's a tax collector and won't let her pass until she pays him $5 or $10 or whatever it is. That's a tax collector who's not actually a licensed tax collector.
It's called protection.
But it's very good, but he's not actually licensed by anyone to do that. You better pay him, but he's not licensed to do that. An example happened to me today. Is Mishael or Chana on this call? Are they here? I drove with Michael and Chana today to Rosarito, over there to the fish market. And we're crossing this toll road that's not supposed to be a toll road. It's a toll road that officially closed down many years ago. But the booths are still there. And so there are people who man those booths, and you have to pay them when you drive through that road. But if the police show up or the federals show up, then they run for the mountains because they're not actually supposed to be collecting taxes there. So they sit there so long as the soldiers are not there. If the soldiers show up, these people run out of the booths, run into the mountains. But while they're there, you better pay them. Or it's a tax collector, the more classic type, like I mentioned to you. He bought the rights to collect taxes from the people, but he has no amount, he has no limit to how much he can charge people, as long as he pays his royalties to the government. He keeps what he wants and gives what he wants. But taxes that the king has determined, and he says you take a third or a quarter or any set amount. And he appoints a Jewish tax collector to go collect these taxes from the people. And it's known, noda. It's known that this person is a trustworthy person. And he does not add anything to what the king decreed. He's not a robber. Because the law of the king is the law. The law of the king is the law in which case? The famous word that they use in Aramaic for the sentence is dina, de malchuta, dina, right? You've heard this before? This is just in Hebrew. Din hamelech dinhu. This only applies to financial law. If you want to see, to compare that, look in the Laws of Kings, chapter 3, halakha 9. Over there, the Rambam says that if the king tells you to violate one of the mitzvot of the Torah, it's like if your parent tells you to violate one of the mitzvot of the Torah. Both your parent and the king first must listen to God. And therefore, you listen to those people only when it doesn't contradict that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells you. But in the laws of finances, the king, their word is law. V'lo, and furthermore, אלא שהוא עובר המבריח מן המוכס זה, מפני שהוא גוזל מנת המלך, בין שהיה מלך גוי, בין שהיה מלך ישראל. This person who doesn't pay taxes in a lawful system of taxes is actually considered a criminal. Because this person is stealing that which rightfully belongs to the king, to the government. And it doesn't matter whether the king is Jewish or the king is not Jewish. And this brings me to the next halakha. For the next halakha, we're going to have to study a little bit of Tanakh. Why do I say going to have? Because we have to. What can we do? Sometimes you have to open up that book. And here, I'm going to request that I just get a few more extra minutes than I usually have. If everyone needs to go when they need to go, please feel free to do so. Let's start. I want to look at two biblical stories with you. The first one, if you open up your Tanakh. Okay, who knows the book of Shemuel Bet? Some people know their Tanakh. Some of you, I have a chazakah that you know your Nevi'im very well. Let's look at the 9th chapter of Shemuel Bet. Chapter 9. King David is the king of Israel. Thank you to whoever is sending the links in there. I appreciate that very much. Vayomer David. David HaMelech says, Hachi yesh od asher notar levet Shaul. Where else is there? Who else is left from the house of Shaul? But if you look back one chapter. In Pasuk Tedvav, Vayimloch David al kol Yisrael. David HaMelech ruled over the whole Jewish people. Vayhi David oseh mishpat tzedakah lechol amo. And David HaMelech was known that he did righteousness and justice for all of his people. He was a just leader. In the wake of that sentence, we come to chapter 9. Vayomer David says, Hachi yesh od asher notar levet Shaul. Is there anyone else who is left from the house of Shaul? Ve'seimo chesed, and I will do for him chesed. Ba'avur Yehonatan, in the merit of Yehonatan. Ulvet Shaul eved ushmo Tziba. Tziba. There is an eved, a servant of the house of Shaul, and his name was Tziva. Vayikru lo el David, and they call him to David. They summon him. Vayomer HaMelech elav, and the king tells him, Ha'ata Tziva vayomer avdecha. Are you Tziva? And he says, yes, I am. And he says, I'm your servant. Vayomer HaMelech, and the king David asks, Ha'efes od ish levet Shaul. Is there anyone left to the house of Shaul? Ve'esei imo chesed Elohim, and I will do the kindness of God to him. Vayomer Tziva al HaMelech, and he tells him, Od ben Yehonatan necher raglaim. There is a son left to Yehonatan, your dear friend David. And he is necher raglaim. He's handicapped in his legs. Anyone remember that story? Look in chapter 4.
This is the story of Tziva, or whatever his name.
You call him Tziva or Tziba?
Tziva, probably Tziva, because Tziva is...
I always heard him Tziba, but I see here with Avet. Listen, I'm assuming old Sephardim didn't say anyways, but okay, if anyone has an authoritative thought on the matter. To tell the story, in Perek Daled, the 4th chapter.
I don't remember what chapter. I just remember, generally speaking, when David he told David that Tziva was mored because.
Wait, later, that's later. That's later. We're going to read that together. Wait. Let's find out how he got handicapped. Look in chapter 4. V'Yonatan ben Shaul ben Necher Raglayim, chapter 4, verse 4. Yonatan, the son of Shaul, had a son who was crippled in his legs. Ben Chamesh Shanim Haya, he was 5 years old. Bevo Shemuat Shaul v'Yonatan mi'Israel. When the news came about the deaths of Shaul and Yonatan in Israel. Vatisehu omanto. Who's omanto? Omanto is his caretaker, his nursemaid. Vatanos, and she runs away. Vayhi bechofza lanus. Vayipol. Vayipaseach. That because she was running away so fast, she dropped him. She dropped him and hurt his legs. Ushmo Mephibosheth, and his name is Mephibosheth, which is an interesting name, Mephibosheth. From my mouth I will be shamed. Chachamim understood from this, by the way, that he actually was David HaMelech's teacher at some point in his life, but I'm going to avoid Midrashim for right now and just focus on what is written inside of the text. So we find out that at the age of 5, Mephibosheth becomes... I'm not actually holding in the politically correct ways to say this, but he had a handicap, and this handicap follows him all through his life. And so back to chapter 9, Tziba tells David, there is someone left. He's the son of Yonatan. Vayomer lo HaMelech, and the king tells him, chapter 9, verse 4, Efohu, where is he? Vayomer Tziva al HaMelech, and he tells him, Hinehu bet Machir ben Amiel belo davar. He's living over there in this house in a place called Lo Davar. Vayishlach HaMelech David vayikacheu mi bet Machir ben Amiel melo davar, and David HaMelech sends for him, and he brings him out of that home. Vayavo Mephibosheth ben Yehonatan ben Shaul al David, and Mephibosheth, the son of Yehonatan, the son of Shaul, comes to David. Vayipol al panav vayishtachu, when he falls on his face and bows down to him. Vayomer David, and David says, Mephibosheth. And he says, are you Mephibosheth? And he says, V'hineh. And he tells him, Vayomer hine avdecha, I am your servant. Vayomer lo David al tira, and David HaMelech tells him, have no fear. Ki aso e'aseh imecha chesed ba'avur Yonatan avicha. I wish to do kindness with you because of your father Yehonatan. Vashivoti lechat kol sedei Shaul avicha, and I will give you all the fields of Shaul avicha, Shaul your ancestor. Vata tochal lechem al shulchani tamid, and you'll eat bread at my table always. Vayishtachu, and he bows to him. Vayomer, and he tells him, Me avdecha, who is your servant? What am I? Ki fanita el hakelev hamet asher kamoni. What is your servant that you should pay attention to a dead dog like me? ויקרא המלך אל ציווה נער שאול ויאמר אליו, and he tells him, כל אשר היה לשאול וכל ביתו נתתי לבן אדונך. Everything that belonged to Shaul and his household I am giving to the son of your master, meaning to Mephibosheth. ועבדת לו את האדמה, and you will work in that land. אתה ובניך ועבדיך, you and your children and your servants. So Tziva, the servant, has his own servants. He's clearly a well-to-do professional servant of royalty. That's going to play a part later in his life. והבאת והיה לבן אדונך לחם ואכלו מפיבושת בן אדונך יאכל תמיד לחם על שולחני. ולציווה 15 בנים ו20 עבדים. He said, your master will eat in my home, and you will work his fields and take care of his properties. And Tziva has 15 sons and 20 servants. ויאמר ציווה על המלך, and he tells the king, ככל אשר יצווה אדוני המלך את עבדו, כן יעשה עבדיך. Anything that you command me, that's what I will do. ומפיבושת אוכל על שולחני כאחד מבני המלך. And then, literally the rest of history continues. Now, let's follow up later in life. In here you have the story of David and Bathsheba. Later you have David and the war that he has with Ammon. And then you have the story of Amnon and Tamar, really a terrible story. A lot of hard stories, by the way, in the Nevi'im that I don't always have good answers for. At a certain point in time, Avshalom starts to wage a war against his father. Who is Avshalom? Who is Avshalom?
The son of King David died through the daughter of Shaul.
Okay, what does he want from David?
I'm thinking that he's angry at his dad for not taking care of his sister when his sister was raped by one of the brothers.
Okay, and so ultimately, though, what does he want? What is his real goal?
He wants the kingship.
He wants the throne. He wants to take over. Now, Avshalom had a terrific strategy. By the way, if you look in chapter 15, Tedvav, Avshalom is not a stupid person. He understands very well human nature. He knows that you attract more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And he has a method, a strategy. Avshalom, in chapter 15, what does the Navi say here? Vaya, pasuk 5, Vaya bikrov ish lishtachavot lo. Whenever somebody would come over to Avshalom and bow down to them, V'shalach et yado, Avshalom would send out his hand, V'hechazik lo, and he held him, V'nashak lo, and he kissed him. What is Avshalom doing?
He's playing the role of the king or something.
Yeah, but what kind of king? If someone comes and bows down to the king, what does the king usually do? So I see that nobody here has ever seen a king. When the king bows down to them, the king says, okay, that's what the king does. You're supposed to bow down to the king. What does Avshalom do? Every time someone comes to bow down to Avshalom, Avshalom picks them up off the ground and he hugs them and he kisses them. And he's such an approachable leader. He knows how to play that game. חבר'ה, ויעש אבשלום כדבר הזה לכל ישראל. אשר יבואו למשפט אל המלך. Avshalom treats every person this way. ויגנב אבשלום את לב אנשי ישראל. And through this method, Avshalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. That's a tactic. It's a tactic on how to gain popularity. Just be really nice to people. You know, there's a book by Dale Carnegie, you know, how to make friends and win, you know, the book I'm talking about. Harav Peretz always told us it's an important book, but you don't have to read it. He said I could summarize it to you in one word. The word, kavod. Give people respect and honor and they will love you forever. People, they live for the respect that you give them. And the more respect you give people, the more they love you. Avshalom wins the hearts of the Jewish people away from David HaMelech by some basic acts of showing kindness and closeness with people. Now this continues. Avshalom ends up going up to Jerusalem. And if you look in Pasuk 13, this messenger comes to David and says, listen, David, the popular vote, the people, they want Avshalom. They're following him. David HaMelech ends up running away from Yerushalayim. And here we come to chapter 16, where David HaMelech bumps into none other than V'David avar me'at meharosh. And David had just went past the summit. V'hine Tziba, nar Mefiboshet likrato. And he sees Tziba, who is the young man of Mephibosheth. How young could he be? He already was the servant of his father. He sees him now. V'tzemed chamorim chavushim. And he has a pair of donkeys that are full of things. V'alehem matayim lechem u'ma'at tzimukim u'ma'at kaitz v'neved yain. He has all kinds of breads and raisins and wine and all kinds of things. V'yomer hamelech et Tziva, ma ele lech? What are these things to you? Vayomer Tziva chamorim levet hamelech lirkov, והלחם והקיץ לאכול הנערים והיין לשתות היעף במדבר. I brought all of these provisions for you and your troops. ויאמר המלך, and the king says, והיה בן אדונך. Where is the son of your master? Who is he asking about? Mephibosheth. And listen to what he tells him. ויאמר ציבן המלך, Hine yoshev b'Yerushalayim. He's now sitting in Jerusalem. Ki amar, because he said, Hayom, today yashivu li bet Yisrael et mamlechut avi. Today the Jewish people are going to return to me the rightful kingdom that is mine, the Jewish kingdom. Meaning there's some kind of grudge here in the family of Shaul against David HaMelech. Vayomer HaMelech letzivan. David HaMelech says to him, Hine lecha kol asher lemfiboshet. Everything that belongs to Mephibosheth, all of his property, all of his real estate, everything belongs to you. Vayomer tziva hishtachaveti emtza chen beinecha adoni HaMelech. He's so happy. He says, I'm bowing to you, and I'm so grateful to have found favor in your eyes. And at this point, the famous story happens when Shimei ben Gera comes out and curses David. I don't want to get stuck on that story. I do want to show you what happens a little bit later. David HaMelech comes to Yerushalayim. Look in chapter 19, Pasuk 25. ומפיבושת בן שאול ירד לקראת המלך. Mephibosheth, the son of Shaul, comes towards the king. ולא עשה רגליו ולא עשה שפמו, ואת בגדיו לא חיבס למין היום לכת המלך עד היום אשר בא ושלום. He looked horrible. He had not taken care of his body, not his feet, not his mustache, not his hair, not his beard. He was waiting for David HaMelech to return. ויהי קיווה ירושלים לקראת המלך, ויאמר לו המלך, למה לא הלכת עמי מפיבושת? The king tells him, hey, all of Yerushalayim is coming out to greet David. And David tells Mephibosheth, where were you? Why didn't you go with me? ויאמר אדוני המלך, עבדי רימני. My master, the king, my servant, Zibai tricked me. כי אמר עבדך, he said, איך בשל לי החמור ורכב עליו ולכת המלך, כי פיסח עבדך. He told me, I will saddle up the donkey and I'll ride it to the king because you, my master, you're not able to do this. וירגל בעבדך לאדוני המלך, ואדוני המלך כמלאך אלוהים, ועשה הטוב בעיניך. He tricked you. He lied. He lied. I would have never rebelled against you, says David HaMelech. But you believed him. You believed him. And the truth is, he tells David HaMelech, ומה יש לי עוד צדקה ולזעוק עוד על המלך? He said, you know, I have to tell you, I'm just so happy. He goes, ויאמר מפיבושת המלך גם את הכל ייקח אחרי אשר בא אדוני המלך בשלום אל ביתו. David HaMelech tries to suggest maybe we can split your property between you and your servant. And Mephibosheth tells him, listen, I don't care about my property. The only thing I cared about is that you're home safely, my king. You have to recognize here that Mephibosheth, who we thought maybe was a bad guy, turns out to be a good guy. Tzibah, who we think is a good guy, turns out to be a bad guy. The question that bothers our Chachamim here is, does David HaMelech have the right to confiscate someone's property because he's upset at them? Tzibah shows up and says that, David, my master is rebelling against you. At that point in time, does David HaMelech have a right to seize someone's property, all of their property, give it to somebody else? And then later in history, does he have the right to then split it back and share some of it back with Mephibosheth? And this question of what is the power of the government over people's finances is one that is very dear to heart, not just of our Chachamim, but of everybody. I'm sure you know that in this country, your assets can be forfeited or seized. Your accounts can be frozen. This can be done for many different reasons. Money, especially cash, can be confiscated from you for very long periods of time without you really being able to do anything about it. I read a story about a small business owner. She ran some kind of bakery, and she would come make regular small deposits, and the government authorities flagged her as maybe trying to launder money, and she was not laundering money. She was an old grandma that ran a bakery, and what ended up happening was for years and years and years, they froze her accounts. She lost her business. She lost everything. At the end of the day, the government has the right to do such things. Is it right? Is it not? Does the Torah agree? That's exactly what Rabbeinu Rambam is coming to tell us. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the first half of this halakha. And the second half is where we're going to continue next week, because I want to give you homework to study the next story. That way we're not reading the whole Tanakh together here in the class, but we can do it piece by piece. So look with me back in the Rambam's Mishneh Torah. Halakha 12. The Rambam says, V'chen melech, and a king. Shehesim mas al bnei ha'ir, who puts a tax on the people of a city, or al kol ish va'ish davar katzuv mishana lashana, or on every individual, a set amount every year, or al kol sadeh v'sadeh davar katzuv, or some kind of property tax on every field, or shegazar shekol mish yavor l'davar zeh, yavor al davar zeh, yilakchu kol nechasav levet hamelech, or if someone who violates a certain crime, that the government will seize all of his assets. או כל מי שימצא בשדה בשעת הגורן, הוא ייתן המס שעליה. Or whoever is found in the field in the time of the goren, the time where you gather the harvest, will pay the taxes for that field. בין שהיה הוא בעל השדה, בין שאינו בעל השדה, whether he is the actual owner of the field or not. וכל כיוצא בדברים אלו, or any type of tax like this. What kind of tax? It's a fair tax. It's a tax that applies to everyone equally, or to every individual equally, or to every property. It's not a tax that is because of a certain hair color that a person has, or a religion that a person has, or it's a tax that applies to everyone. Eno gozel, he's not considered stealing, meaning it's within the right of the king to do such a thing. V'Yisrael shegava otan lamelech eno becheskat gazlan. And a tax collector who works for the king in this capacity is not considered someone who steals. V'harehu kasher, and he's considered a kasher person. V'hu shelo yosif v'lo yishane klum, and that's on the assumption that he will not add or change anything to the king's laws. V'lo yikach la'atzmo klum, and he will not take for himself anything. I'm going to assign 2 assignments after today's shiur. I'm going to ask you to please do them. One of them is going to be to read a section of Chacham Faur's writings about Yeshu, the gospel according to the Jews. I think I finally got a PDF of it. I will send it with you. And the second is going to be the story of Achav, but in a moment. V'chen melech sheka'as al echad me'avadav. And therefore a king who got angry at one of his servants, V'shamashav, Mibnei HaMedina, or any of his citizens that serve him, V'lakach sadehu o chatzero, and he seizes his field or his courtyard, Eino gozel, he's not considered stealing. Umutar le'enot ba, and you're allowed to get benefit from that. V'lokeach ota min hamelech, harei hi shelo. And if the king rightfully seizes someone's property and then puts it in a public auction, and the public buys that field or that house or that property, they are allowed to do that, and it's not considered stealing. Then haba'alim motzi'in otam miyado, and the original owner cannot come and demand that back from the person who purchased it from the king. Shezeh din hamelachin kulan. This is the law of all the kings. Likach kol mamon shamashehen keshekoasin alehem, that they can confiscate someone's property or their what they own when they're upset with them, meaning when they do something wrong against the government. V'harei hamelech hifkia shibudan ונעשת חצר זו, או שדה זו כהפקר, וכל הקונה אותה מן המלך זכה בה. The king essentially frees this property from anyone's ownership and now becomes the king's property, and he can sell it to whoever he wants. אבל מלך, but a king, שלקח חצר או שדה שלאחד מבני המדינה דרך חמאס, but a king who seizes someone's property in a way that is illegal, in a way that is angry, in a way that is Hamas. It's amazing that somebody would choose that word. Shelo kadinin shechakak, that does not follow the laws that are legislated. Harei ze gazlan, this king is stealing. Ve'alokeach mimeno, and somebody who takes or buys that property from the king, motzi'in haba'alin miyado, the king, the original owners are allowed to come to Bedin and demand their property back. So there's 2 ways. If a king seizes property or assets because the law allows for such a thing, then it's not considered stealing, and a person is able to take that from the king. But if the government steals from a person out of a personal vendetta, that's not legislated, it's not the law. In that situation, the first owner still has claim and can come and take the property away from the second person. And the second person who buys it is really stealing land or property. And therefore, the bottom line rule from all of this, kol din shiachakok oto hamelech lakol. Any law which the king legislates for everyone, v'lo yeh la'adam echad b'fnei atzmo, and it's not intended to single out one individual person in a way that's not just. Eino gazel, it's not stealing. וכל שיקח מאיש זה בלבד שלא כדת הידועה לכל, אלא חמס את זה, הרי זה גזל. But if it's something that does not follow the law that is known to everybody, it's some kind of tyrannical law that is intended to cause suffering to an individual or a group of individuals, that law is not considered a law. The king doesn't have that kind of power to tyrannize his people. And that is to be considered stolen property like any other stolen property, even though the law of the land would tell you otherwise. I'm sharing this with you for a reason, because the next section that we're going to study together is all about showing exactly how the king has the right to determine these things. But there's a story that I want you to look at before we go. And this story is a story of King Achav. King Achav and a man by the name of
Navot.
Very good, Navot. King Achav and Navot. King Achav wants a field. Navot doesn't want to give it to him. His wife, Izebel, gets involved in the story. I'm going to get home later tonight. I'll assign this in the Google Classroom. I ask that you study that story very well, because that's where I'm going to begin next week, and to compare and contrast the story of David HaMelech with Izebel. I was going to do it tonight, but I can't hold you here the whole night. For right now, I wanted to continue where we left off last week about murder. The government, we use the word king. The king is, like we said, not necessarily a king. The government has a lot more freedom to do things and implement laws. Financial law we saw today. Previous laws we saw capital punishment and other such crimes. The Torah intentionally left certain areas of halakha blank and open so that the Jewish people could determine what is the best way for them to be governed, at least in the details of the laws. Now you might say, well, a king is a tyrant in the first place. The Jewish people don't want that king's law. There's a very interesting halakha here. If you want to get a sneak peek, to look at the last halakha in this section, halakha 18. I'm going to do it with you next week. But you find that even the most tyrannical king in halakha only has power because the people give it to him. I don't want to share more tonight, but Zad Hashem, we're going to begin with that next week, and that will be our shul next week. For right now, what's important for us to understand is that Rabbi Chaim David Halevy is going to use all of these halachot collected from the Rambam to make the case that no one should be afraid that a Torah-run government, that a state of Israel that takes its inspiration from the Torah of Israel is somehow going to be limited in its ability to govern its people in a modern way, in a way that they would wish to be governed by. There is so much room in halakha for innovation, sometimes even for intervention of our chachamim, of our government, of our king, the civil side of the government, in order to make a better and more perfect place for human beings to live in society. And so I'm making this case with as many sources as I can, because I don't want someone to walk away thinking, oh, this was Rabbi Chaim David Halevy's imagination. It's no imagination. It's written here from the Talmud, found in the writings of the Rambam, later ruled in the Shulchan Aruch. These are the kind of halachot that are going to be very important for us to revisit when we go forward. For right now, thank you so much for learning Torah with me. B'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach, we should get together for many more opportunities and good occasions.